When the story ended, I, the designated villainess, lost everything. My own brother had me committed to a psychiatric hospital. My fate was to be kept there until the end of my life. But I refused to let them decide even the way my story would close. At the fairy tale wedding of the story's beloved heroine, in front of all the glittering guests, I threw myself into the sea. And just like that, Port Sterling lost its most infamously wicked heiress. In her place, a small street vendor appeared in Riverbend, selling braised meats from a cart, until, 3 years later, a man stopped in front of my stall. He asked if I wanted to go back and burn everything to the ground. I kept my head down, my knife moving steadily as I sliced beef on the cutting board. An old regular, one of my best customers, kept glancing at the man standing still before my cart. Finally, curiosity got to him, and he leaned in. "B," he whispered, "who's this guy?" "You know. Someone with money. Why are you out here selling braised pork knuckles?" My knife came down in a clean final chop. I lifted my head, my gaze bypassing the old man and settling on Caleb Thorne. My voice was even. "Oh, him. He used to work for our family." The old man let out a short, barking laugh, as if I'd just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "Come on. The way you pinch every penny? You, a high society lady? A real heiress wouldn't last a day out here. She'd be crying for her daddy by lunchtime." He walked away still chuckling. I pulled off my disposable gloves and smiled too. He was right. I was B, the woman selling braised meats on the street for 2 years, not Beatrice Parrish, the arrogant, couture-clad heiress of Port Sterling. My smile faded. I put my hands on my hips and called to the lingering customers. "All right, show's over. Last 3 pork knuckles for the day. When they're gone, I'm gone." I sold the last one, packed up, and watched the crowd disperse. Only then did a voice, tight with emotion, cut through the quiet. "Beatrice, are you really going to hide here and sell food for the rest of your life?" I didn't turn around. I just kept scrubbing the heavy pot under the faucet, the scouring pad scraping against metal. He was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice trembled. "B. Your brother Larry is looking for you too. If you want to go back, I'll help you this time. I swear it." I shut off the water. The sudden silence was deafening. "Help me?" I turned, lifting the pot onto my cart with a loud clang. "Caleb, what's left of me that you could possibly want?" He'd said he would help me once before. The result was him helping my brother deliver the final, most painful betrayal. 3 years ago, after the heroine Clara was involved in an incident, my brother and my childhood sweetheart cornered me with accusations I couldn't escape. On his deathbed, my father pressed a card and a small USB drive into my hand. "Beatrice, go," he rasped. "Go to Switzerland. There's enough money there for you to live comfortably. Don't come back." It was my only escape in a world that had turned against me. I told no one. I called only Caleb, the one person I thought would leave a window open for me even if the world shut every door. When I handed him the plane ticket, I didn't notice the conflict in his eyes. Only when my limbs went weak and my vision blurred did a cold dread wash over me. In the last second before losing consciousness, I saw him pull the USB drive from my pocket. "B," he said, his voice suddenly distant, "people have to face the consequences of their actions." When I woke, I was in a psychiatric hospital. Later, in the single newspaper I was allowed to read once a week, I saw the engagement announcement for Clara and Victor. The article gushed about the bride's extraordinary dowry, a sum that matched, down to the dollar, the amount my father had left for me. How tragically ironic. My father's final act of love had become the crown jewel of someone else's wedding. And now the architect of my downfall stood before me, his voice unsteady. "Why are you so stubborn? 3 years ago, you jumped into the sea right in front of us. Have you ever thought about how the people you left behind lived with that? Are you so unafraid of anything that you're now afraid to come back with me?" I gave him a long, cool look. His eyes were red with frustration. I thought for a moment. "I'll apologize to Clara," I said. Caleb flinched. "What?" I smiled. "For ruining her wedding 3 years ago. I regret that. Tell her she won't be troubled by me ever again. And you can rest easy too. I swear on my father's memory, I will never interfere with your perfect ending. So please, leave me alone. Don't pretend you're here to help me reclaim anything. Caleb stood frozen, staring at me, his mouth opening and closing without sound. I hopped onto my tricycle cart and pedaled away. In the rearview mirror, I saw him clutch his chest and sink to his knees, pale as paper. I pushed the pedals harder. After all, I had nothing left for him to take from me. I didn't know what had gone wrong with Clara and her admirers, but the story had twisted beyond recognition. Somehow, I, the villainess, had survived, and Caleb, the original antagonist, had abruptly changed sides. Sure enough, the day after Caleb appeared, my brother Larry showed up outside my apartment. He was lifting the tarp covering my tricycle with 2 fingers, as though the cart itself offended him. His knuckles were white. When he heard my footsteps, he stiffened. Then he turned around. The moment he saw me, his eyes widened in shock. He scanned me from head to toe, my worn clothes, cheap shoes, everything about my modest life. After a long moment, he looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "You really are alive," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thanks to you," I replied calmly. "Sorry to disappoint you by not dying in that place." The words hit him. His chest rose sharply. "Do you have to talk to me like that? I'm your brother, B. Brother. I hadn't used that word in years. When we were young, I followed him everywhere. He loved it, always lifting me onto his shoulders. He was the brother I trusted most. Which was why, when I turned 18 and realized he was the story's devoted second male lead, the one fated to lock me away, I ran to him in a panic. He laughed, tapped my forehead, told me I had been reading too many novels. He said he would never abandon me. I believed him. But when Clara arrived, he forgot his promises. Suddenly I was spoiled, unreasonable. A dress I loved, he said would look better on Clara. A concert I wanted to attend, he said was too loud for Clara. I told him again and again that I had never harmed her. He never once believed me. "Beatrice, all the awful things you do. Don't you feel ashamed? I don't have a sister like you." Gab. In that moment, I knew the brother I loved was gone. Now this man stood before me, pretending he was still my family. "What kind of brother are you?" I asked quietly. His composure crumbled. "B, 3 years ago, I never thought you would actually try something like that. I was too. Is something wrong with Clara?" I cut in. He stared, stunned. Why were both men showing up out of nowhere? The only reason I could think of was her. Was she kidnapped again? Hit by another car? Whatever happened has nothing to do with me. I'm at the Eastgate Market every day. Ask anyone. And look at me, I clearly don't have the money to cause trouble for her. I spoke evenly. Larry just stood there, frozen. "Is there anything else?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "No. It's not about Clara. I just heard you were alive." "Oh. Worried I'd come back for revenge?" "Caleb came yesterday. Said he'd help me destroy everything." I turned him down. "Ask the vendors." "No." Larry's voice cracked. "B, I just wanted to see my sister." The silence was suffocating. Then I let out a short laugh. His face twisted with panic. "Sorry," I said. "It was just a funny joke. Looking at you now, anyone would think you were the one locked away for 3 years." He tried to smile, but it looked more like breaking. "B, come home. For Dad's sake." I froze. When Dad was dying, Larry whispered, he held my hand, and the only name he said was yours. He wouldn't close his eyes. He begged me to protect you. Over and over. He begged me. "Stop." My voice snapped. "B. Stop. Don't talk about him." I lost control. I threw whatever I could grab from my cart. He didn't move, even when a jar struck his forehead and left a welt. "You have no right to talk about my father," I said, trembling. "I begged you to let me see him. I begged you on my knees. I hurt myself pleading with you. And you still said no. You said if he saw me, the shock would kill him." All while he was calling my name at the end. Tears I had held back for years finally spilled over. Larry crouched, sobbing. I was manipulated. Clara said if you got out, you'd take her down with you. That you'd ruin Dad's reputation. And I believed her. I rushed forward and grabbed his collar. You let me hear of his death in a hospital. You didn't even let me attend his funeral. What kind of brother are you? I have nothing left. I can't harm Clara. Why are you back? Do I have to disappear completely before you leave me alone? He let me shake him, tears running unchecked. I know you hate me. B, come home. I'll give everything back. I'll make up for it. I'll protect you. I slapped him hard. My brother died a long time ago. My quiet life shattered. Caleb and Larry were a curse. I was taken from my apartment. When I woke, I was tied to a pillar on a beach. Not far from me, Clara was tied to another. When she saw me awake, she smiled brightly. Beatrice, I can't believe you're still alive. But since you didn't die then, we can play a little game now. Your brother, your childhood sweetheart, and your loyal admirer should be getting a message saying we've been kidnapped. Very soon, they'll also receive proof that you arranged my kidnapping. So let's see. Who do you think will win this time? The loser, she said lightly, gets to disappear. How does that sound? Cold seawater washed over my ankles, sending a violent shiver through me. I knew I would lose. Against Clara, I always lost. But I couldn't give up. My father's last wish was for me to live. I struggled against the ropes as 3 cars screeched to a halt on the beach. Doors flew open. Larry leapt out first, his face chalk white, one shoe missing. Caleb and Victor were right behind him, all looking equally terrified. Clara began to cry. Save me first, she pleaded weakly. I said nothing, twisting my wrists against the ropes as the tide rose, now at our chests. I wasn't the heroine. No one was supposed to save me. But in the next second, save B. Get B first. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Then the word slammed into me like another wave. Larry's voice was hoarse, cracking on my name. Caleb's shout overlapped his, raw and desperate. Even Victor, the story's male lead who was supposed to love Clara above all else, was running straight toward me, not her. For the first time in my life, all 3 of them chose me. The tide surged higher, icy water punching the air from my lungs. I twisted against the ropes until my shoulders burned. I wasn't the heroine. I wasn't supposed to be saved. But my body clung to life anyway, stubborn and shameless. Hands hit the water around me, splashes and curses and choked breaths mixing with the roar of the sea. B, look at me. Larry was closest, his face chalk white, hair plastered to his forehead. His hands fumbled with the knot at my waist, fingers slipping on the soaked rope. It's okay, I've got you. You're making it worse, Caleb snapped, shoving him aside. His jaw was clenched so tight the veins in his neck stood out. He ripped a pocket knife open with his teeth and sawed through the rope at my wrists, movements sharp and efficient despite the trembling in his hands. B, breathe. Just breathe. Behind them, Victor plunged deeper, almost losing his footing as a wave slammed into his chest. He gritted his teeth and reached for the pillar, bracing it with his shoulder as if that could hold back the sea itself. Hold on, he growled. We're not losing you again. Again. The word sliced through me. On the other pillar, Clara stared at us, mouth hanging open. For a moment she looked genuinely stunned, like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. Wait, she choked. Victor, what are you doing? Save me first, I'm the one in danger. No one answered her. The last strand of rope snapped. My arms fell forward, dead weight, and I pitched into Caleb's chest. His arms closed around me automatically, one under my knees, one around my back, as if he'd done this 1,000 times in his head. Got you, he whispered, more to himself than to me. This time, I'm not letting go. Larry grabbed onto his shoulder, steadying us both as we stumbled toward shore. Victor followed, still shielding us from the strongest of the waves. None of them looked at Clara. Not once. Her voice rose behind us, shrill and hysterical. Are you insane? She's the villainess. She tried to kill me. She ruined everything. A wave crashed over her head, swallowing the rest of her words. On solid ground, my knees buckled. Caleb lowered me onto the wet sand, stripping off his own jacket to wrap around my shivering shoulders. Larry fell to his knees beside me, his hands hovering, afraid to touch me, terrified not to. "B, are you cold? Does anything hurt? Can you hear me?" His voice broke on every other word. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I didn't know if it was from the cold or from the absurd sight in front of me, my brother, my childhood sweetheart, and my former executioner all crowding around me like I was something precious and fragile instead of the designated villainess. Clara coughed and sputtered as another wave shoved her against her pillar. Finally, Victor turned his head. "Untie her," he said flatly to the men who had come with them, the ones still standing frozen near the cars. "And call the police. Tell them we're filing a kidnapping report." Clara's face twisted. "Victor. It was just a joke." I was scared, I didn't mean. Victor's jaw tightened. "You tied her up in the rising tide and framed her again, Clara." He looked at me. Our eyes met for the first time in 3 years. There was none of the blind worship he used to have for his little goddess. Only exhaustion. And something that looked disturbingly like regret. "I was there when she jumped off that cliff," he said quietly. "And I was there when they dragged her broken body out of the water. I told myself she deserved it." His voice trembled. "I'm not telling myself that now." Clara froze. For the first time, she seemed to realize the script wasn't going the way it was supposed to. "This isn't how it's meant to be," she whispered. "You're supposed to save me. You're all supposed to save me." She sounded less like a person and more like a reader whose favorite ending had been spoiled. I wrapped Caleb's jacket tighter around myself and forced my lips into something that might have been a smile. "Welcome to my world, Clara," I rasped. My throat burned from salt water. "The story doesn't always go the way you want." Her eyes snapped to mine, wild and gleaming. "You don't get to say that," she hissed. "You're not the heroine." "Exactly," I said. "And I'm still alive." For a heartbeat, silence. Then sirens wailed in the distance. Clara started screaming again. I closed my eyes. For the first time in 3 years, I let myself breathe. The police took statements right there on the beach. Someone gave me a blanket. Someone else checked my pulse and pupils and kept asking if I felt dizzy. I answered mechanically, my mind floating somewhere above my body, watching the scene from a distance. Clara ranted and raved, accusing everyone but herself. When the officers showed her the messages she'd sent, the forged threats, the fake evidence she'd prepared to blame the kidnapping on me, her face drained of color. When they mentioned reviewing CCTV footage and tracing the phone used to send the ransom text, she went completely silent. Larry stayed glued to my side as if I might disappear if he blinked. Caleb lingered just behind me, stiff and tense, like a bodyguard waiting for the next attack. Victor stood a little apart, hands in his pockets, head bowed, his expression unreadable. When it was finally over and Clara had been taken away in the back of a squad car, I tried to stand. Larry caught my arm. "B, where are you going?" "I'll drive you home." "Home?" I echoed. The word tasted wrong in my mouth. "I don't have a home." "You have the parish estate," he insisted. "You have?" "I have a rented room above a grocery store and a food cart with a missing wheel," I cut in. "And that's exactly where I'm going." Larry flinched. Caleb cleared his throat. "B. No." I turned on him. "You don't get to say my name like that. Not after what you did." His eyes dimmed, but he didn't argue. Victor stepped forward, just enough to be heard. "You should at least go to a hospital for observation. See water, shock." "I've had worse," I said quietly. "You know that." He shut his eyes for a second. Yes. He knew. They all knew. They knew I'd been strapped to a bed in a psychiatric ward, jolted with electricity until my tongue bled. They knew I'd been pumped full of pills I couldn't pronounce. They knew I'd begged to see my father one last time, and Larry had said no. They knew. They just hadn't cared. Not until now. "I'm fine," I repeated. "I have vegetables to chop and pork bones to blanch. The Eastgate Market doesn't run itself." I walked away without looking back. No one chased me. For once, they understood that this wasn't a scene they got to control. The next morning, I went back to the market as usual. The other vendors stared openly when I pushed my tricycle cart into its usual spot. A few started whispering. One woman, old Madame Jo who sold tofu 3 stalls down, clucked her tongue.
I saw the news, she said, voice low.
Those rich people. Truly something else. I lit the burner under my broth pot. They're bored. She huffed. Bored enough to tie people up at the beach? Bored enough to pretend they're kidnapped? TSK. If they have nothing better to do, I can lend them a knife to help cut tofu. I smiled faintly. Please don't. Their fingers are too soft. The line started forming as the smell of simmering spices carried over the market. People ordered as usual, braised pork knuckles, marinated eggs, beef tendon, pickled vegetables. I moved through the motions like a machine, scooping and cutting and packing, my body remembering every step even while my mind drifted. You should come home. You're still Dad's daughter. I'll protect you this time. Their voices echoed in my head, unwanted ghosts that wouldn't leave. I was wiping down the counter between rushes when a shadow fell over my cart. Busy as always, a familiar voice said. I didn't look up. We're cash only. No returns, no credit. Caleb didn't move away. I heard your pork knuckles are the best in Riverbend. They were better when I imagined feeding them to you underwater, I said. Unfortunately, I'm out of that version. He was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, I deserve that. I tossed the rag into the bucket. You deserve worse. He didn't argue. Instead, he set a small envelope on the edge of my cart. It was thick, the contents stiff and square inside. My hand twitched, wanting to snatch it away and burn it without looking, but curiosity, my old, stubborn enemy, won. What is it? I asked. The USB drive your father gave you, he said. And copies of everything on it. My heartbeat stuttered. Slowly, carefully, I picked up the envelope. You had it the whole time, I said. My voice sounded flat, almost calm. 3 years. Yes. Clara's dowry. My father's accounts. The offshore funds. The shell companies in Switzerland. You handed all of it to them. Yes. I stared at him. Why are you giving it back? He swallowed. For once, his expensive shirt and polished shoes looked like a costume he hadn't earned. Because the story ended, he said quietly. The original story. Clara married Victor. The villainess died. The hero got his fairy tale. That's how it was supposed to be. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw real fear there. But when you jumped, he continued, when you threw yourself into the sea at her wedding. Something broke. Not just in the plot. In me. I almost laughed. You drugged me, I reminded him. You carried me to that hospital. You watched them sign the papers? Yes, he said again. And I watched you disappear. I told myself I'd done the right thing. That you were dangerous. That you needed to be contained. He took a shaky breath. And then, 3 months later, I saw Victor and Clara smiling on the front page of the paper with your dowry paying for her dress. I saw Larry toasting them with your inheritance in his glass. I saw myself in the background, standing behind them like a loyal dog. Another breath. I've been choking on that image for 3 years. Silence settled between us, thick and heavy. I can't undo what I did, he said finally. But I can give you the weapon I stole from you. What you do with it is up to you. He stepped back. I won't force you to go back, he added. I won't drag you to the estate or to the boardroom. If you want to stay here and sell braised meats for the rest of your life, I'll eat here every day and tip badly just to annoy you. A reluctant, startled laugh escaped me. He smiled, small and sad. But if you do decide you're ready to burn it all down, call me. He tapped the envelope. The match is in there. Then he left. I stared at the envelope for a long time. My father's voice echoed in my memory. Go now to Switzerland. There's enough money there for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Don't ever come back. He'd wanted to save me from this world. But I'd already died here once. Maybe it was time for the story to end a little differently. I closed the lid of my cart an hour early that day. The parish estate loomed over the harbor like a judgment. I'd grown up in that house. Learned to walk on those polished floors. Learned to smile in those gilded mirrors. Learned to breathe under the weight of chandeliers and expectations. Now I walked up the front steps in a cheap jacket and grocery store shoes, holding an envelope that could topple all of it. The gates opened before I could ring the bell. Larry stood there, hair messy, shirt wrinkled, as if he hadn't slept since the beach. His eyes were swollen and red. "B," he breathed. "You came." "Don't make it sound like a miracle," I said. "I didn't have change for the bus, so I thought I'd drop by and rob you." His lips twitched, a ghost of our old sibling banter. "Rob me," he said hoarsely. "Take everything. I'll sign it all over to you. Shares, assets, property." "Stop." I brushed past him into the foyer. "You don't get to buy forgiveness." He flinched. The house smelled the same, expensive flowers, polished wood, faint salt from the harbor. But something was different. The air felt thinner, the shadows longer. Or maybe I was just seeing clearly for the first time. A large portrait hung at the end of the hall. My father, stern and handsome, one hand on the back of an armchair. Clara stood beside him, in a white dress, smiling softly. My stomach twisted. "That wasn't here before," I said. Larry followed my gaze, shame crawling over his face. "It was Victor's idea. After the engagement. He said it made sense to update the family image." "The family," I echoed. "Of course." I turned away before I could start screaming. "Where's the study?" I asked. "The one Dad used on the second floor. Has anyone touched it?" Larry shook his head quickly. "We sealed it after he passed. I kept the key." He fumbled in his pocket and produced it, palm shaking as he placed it in my hand. "Then that's where we start," I said. Dust lay thick on the desk. The shelves were lined with ledgers, old and new. The computer in the corner was off, its screen dark. The window overlooked the harbor, the water glittering in the late afternoon sun. I set the envelope on the desk and opened it. The USB drive looked small and harmless. Innocent, even. Like it hadn't been the pivot on which my entire life turned. "B," Larry said quietly, hovering in the doorway. Do you want me to leave you alone?" "No," I said. "I want you to sit down." He blinked. "Sit," I repeated. He obeyed. I plugged in the USB drive and woke the computer. Files appeared. Spreadsheets. PDFs. Scans of contracts. Bank statements from Switzerland. A folder marked simply, "Last Wish." My throat tightened. I opened it. There were letters. One addressed to me. One to Larry. One to whom it may concern. I double-clicked the first. "B, my stubborn little storm." The words blurred. I blinked hard until they came back into focus. I read in silence. When I finished, I turned the monitor so Larry could see. His hand flew to his mouth as he read the lines meant for him. Lines my father had written with shaking fingers, knowing he was dying, begging his son to protect his daughter, to believe in her when the world turned against her. To never let the heroine's glow blind him to the truth. Larry made a strangled sound. Tears spilled down his face and dripped onto the desk. His voice broke. "I didn't know about this. I never saw any of it." Clara said. "She said Dad regretted indulging you. She said he wanted to cut you off so you would learn your place." Another folder contained recordings, hospital visits, board meetings, arguments with people whose names I recognized from society pages. In every single one, my father defended me. In every single one, Clara twisted his words afterward like a knife. "She told me you'd confessed." Larry's shoulders shook. "She said you admitted to pushing her in front of that car. She said you laughed." I stared at him. "Did you ever ask me?" I asked. He squeezed his eyes shut. "No." The word hung between us, heavier than any accusation. I leaned back in the chair, the cheap fabric of my jacket rustling against the leather. All of this, I said, gesturing to the screen full of evidence, is enough to ruin her. To take back everything she stole. To make every single person who called me crazy choke on it. Larry nodded numbly. But revenge doesn't resurrect the dead, I added. It won't bring Dad back. It won't give me back the years I spent strapped to a bed. He flinched again. So here's what we're going to do, I said. You're going to help me carry out his actual last wish. Anything, he whispered. I'll do anything. I looked him straight in the eye. You're going to step down as interim head of the parish group, I said. You're going to call a full board meeting. You're going to hand me every ounce of power he left to this family. Shares, voting rights, vetoes. His eyes widened.
I can't.
You already did, I cut him off. For Clara. You handed her control of everything in practice, even if the paperwork still had your name. I tapped the screen. You owe Dad this much. You owe me this much. You owe yourself this much, if you really want to stop being the monster you turned into. Silence stretched. Then, slowly, Larry nodded. I'll do it, he said. I'll call the lawyers. Good, I said. And while you do that, I'll take copies of everything here and send them to a very hungry journalist and a very bored financial crimes prosecutor. For the first time that day, something like a genuine, sharp-edged smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. If Clara wants to be the heroine, I said softly, she can try doing it without stolen props. The scandal exploded within a week. Headlines screamed about fraudulent dowries, embezzled inheritance funds, falsified medical records, and a beloved charity darling who had apparently built her entire public image on the ruins of another woman's life. Video clips from the beach leaked. Someone had filmed Clara's game, her smile, her threats. Someone else had captured the exact moment all three men screamed my name first. The internet went wild. Some people still insisted I had to be lying. That villainesses didn't just appear out of nowhere in stories, they had to earn it. That I must have done something terrible off-screen. But for once, public opinion wasn't the point. Legal opinion was. The hospital that had confined me found itself under investigation. So did the doctors who had signed off on my treatment. So did Clara's father, who had quietly shuffled money through shell companies with names like Crescent Holdings and Sterling Future Initiatives. I watched it all unfold from my tiny apartment, sitting cross-legged on my second-hand couch, eating instant noodles because I was too tired to cook anything fancier. Larry came by every day with updates and documents to sign. Each time, he looked a little more hollowed out, as if peeling back the layers of his complicity was physically carving pieces out of him. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said one evening, leaving a stack of papers on my coffee table. Not now. Maybe not ever. I just want you to know I'm not doing this because I'm your brother. Oh? I raised an eyebrow. I'm doing it because I should have done it as a human being 3 years ago, he said. Brother comes after that. For once, I didn't have a cutting reply. Caleb showed up less often, but when he did, he brought things I actually needed, replacement parts for my cart, a better stove, a laminated license to sell at more locations. He never entered without asking permission. He never touched me without making sure I saw his hands first. One afternoon, he lingered by the door, eyes flicking over the mismatched furniture and a single plant wilting in the corner. You know, he said carefully, once everything settles, you won't have to live like this if you don't want to. I slurped my noodles. You saying my decor isn't high society enough for you, Thorne? His lips twitched. I'm saying your father left you enough to never boil instant noodles in a dented pot again. I looked down at the steam curling up from the chipped bowl. Maybe I like noodles, I said. He was quiet. Then, gently, and if you ever decide you like something else. You don't have to choose between being Beatrice Parrish and beef from the braised meat cart. You're allowed to be both. I swapped my chopsticks to my other hand and flicked a noodle at him. He let it hit his sleeve, smiling faintly. Point taken, he said. The board meeting felt like walking onto a stage I'd once owned and then been banned from. But this time, I wasn't wearing couture. I walked in wearing a plain black suit I'd found off the rack, my hair pulled back in a simple knot. No diamonds. No dramatic lipstick. No parish flair. I didn't need any of it. I had the shares now. I had the documents. I had the truth. The directors shifted uneasily as I took the head seat at the table. Some avoided my gaze. Others watched me with open curiosity, like investors who just realized they'd underestimated an asset. Larry sat to my right, eyes down, hands folded neatly. Caleb sat along the wall, technically just an employee observer, but everyone knew he'd been the one coordinating much of the quiet cleanup behind the scenes. Victor wasn't there. He'd resigned from the board 2 days after the story broke. I'd watched his statement on television. He'd admitted to professional negligence, to ignoring red flags, to letting his personal attachments cloud his judgment. He hadn't mentioned Clara's name once. She'd be hearing plenty of it in court. I opened the meeting by playing one of my father's recorded arguments, the one where he'd fought to keep my inheritance ring-fenced, where he'd warned that combining my dowry with Clara's would be morally and legally indefensible. When the recording ended, the room was silent. "Gentlemen, ladies," I said calmly. "This is the voice you ignored when you signed off on the transfer. This is the man whose last wishes you allowed to be trampled because it was easier to believe in the protagonist's glow surrounding a charming young woman and her tragic backstory." A few people shifted uncomfortably. "I am not here to burn this company to the ground," I went on. "My father built it. He loved it almost as much as he loved his children. I intend to keep it standing." Slight, audible exhales of relief. "However," I added, "I am absolutely here to make sure the people who used it as a prop in their little fairy tale are removed. Permanently." By the time the meeting ended, 3 board members had resigned, citing health concerns. 2 others were referred to the Internal Compliance Office. The legal department had a new mandate: cooperate fully with the authorities or get replaced. As I walked out, Larry fell into step beside me. "You were..." He hesitated, searching for a word that wouldn't sound ridiculous. "Very, Dad." I snorted. "Please don't curse me like that." He smiled weakly. We stopped at the end of the hall, near a large window overlooking the city. "I've started seeing a therapist," he said abruptly. "Someone not on our payroll. Someone Clara never met." I blinked. "Congratulations on paying for basic humanity." He winced, then nodded. "I know I can't fix what I did. I can't go back and choose you instead. But I can. I can make sure the man who let himself be written as a background prop never exists again." We stood in silence for a moment, watching the traffic crawl along the roads far below. "B," he said finally. "I know you don't consider me your brother anymore. I accept that. If you ever need anything, and you can't ask as a sister." He swallowed. "Then ask as a shareholder," he finished. "I'll answer." I considered him. Then I nodded once. "That," I said, "I can live with." 6 months later, the Eastgate market was busier than ever. Not because I was some tragic socialite turned folk hero. That wave of voyeuristic curiosity had passed as soon as the next scandal hit. No, the market was busy because my braised meats were good. Word of mouth was relentless. Dock workers recommended me to office workers, who dragged in their dates, who brought their parents, who told their neighbors, and so on. I'd upgraded my cart. It had a shiny new burner, proper wheels, a retractable awning with my stall name printed in plain, bold letters. B's Braces. Sometimes, someone recognized me. "Weren't you that heiress from the news?" a young woman asked once, balancing 2 takeaway boxes. I shrugged. "Only on my days off." She laughed. Caleb kept his promise to tip badly. He ate there often, usually arriving near closing time when the rush had died down. Sometimes he came straight from the office, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. Sometimes he showed up in jeans, looking oddly younger without his armor of professionalism. He never asked me for an answer. But he always answered when I called. Once, my stove sputtered mid-rush. I cursed under my breath, mentally calculating how much money I'd lose if I had to shut down early. 10 minutes later, a familiar car pulled up, and Caleb hopped out with a toolbox. "Your burner doesn't like the wind angle here," he explained, crouching to adjust the valves. "You need a wind guard. I had one fabricated just in case." I narrowed my eyes. You've been spying on my stall again. Market research, he said innocently. Larry visited occasionally, dressed more simply these days. The circles under his eyes had faded. He no longer flinched at the sound of sirens. He bought food and ate it standing up, chatting with the other vendors like a regular customer instead of the Prince of Port Sterling's elite. Once, as he licked sauce off his fingers, he looked at me and said, "You know, Dad would have loved this." "The pork or the chaos?" I asked. "Both," he said. We shared a small, quiet smile. Victor I only saw once more. He approached the stall on a rainy evening, umbrella dripping. His suit was still expensive, but there was a looseness to his posture that hadn't been there before. His eyes were clearer. Older. "Beatrice," he said. "It's been a while." I wiped my hands on my apron. "We're out of heroin-flavored specials," I said. "You'll have to settle for plain old pork." He huffed a soft laugh. "Plain old pork is fine." He ordered, paid, and waited quietly as I packed his food. When I handed him the box, our fingers brushed briefly. I wanted to say, he began, then paused. "No, I need to say this properly." I raised an eyebrow. "You have 30 seconds. My broth's reducing." "I was wrong," he said simply. "Back then? About you. About Clara. About everything. I can't pretend I was tricked. I chose the version of the story that made me feel like a hero. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I didn't want the last words between us to be written by her." The rain drummed steadily on the awning above us. "For what it's worth," he added, "I'm trying to do something different with the rest of my life. Less saving goddesses. More listening to people before deciding who they are." I studied him for a moment. "Good," I said. "Start with yourself." He nodded, as if he'd expected nothing more, and walked away with his food. The next day, someone sent me a link to an article about a foundation funding reforms in mental health care and oversight for psychiatric institutions. There was no name attached. I didn't need one. One night, after closing, I sat on my stool and watched the last of the customers drift away. The market lights flickered, casting long, warm shadows across the pavement. The air smelled like spices and frying oil and the faint tang of the sea. Caleb leaned against a nearby pole, hands in his pockets, watching me. "You look different," he said. "Tired?" I asked. "Alive," he said. I rolled my eyes. "Your standards are low." Speaking as the man who once helped fake your death, I'd say my standards have improved dramatically. I snorted. He shifted his weight. The way he said my name no longer made my skin crawl. That was new. "Yes?" I said. "I know I don't deserve a second chance," he said quietly. "Not with you. Not after what I did. I won't pretend a few USB drives and boardroom maneuvers make us even." "Good," I said. "We're not." He nodded, accepting the blow. "But," I continued, "you did something rare." He blinked. "What's that?" "You stopped reading the story the way it was written for you," I said. "You put the knife down and picked up a broom." His mouth twitched. "That's a very poetic way of calling me a janitor." "Custodian," I corrected. "Of my temper." He laughed, the sound low and warm. I took a breath. "Caleb," I said. The name felt strange and heavy on my tongue, like a key I hadn't decided whether to turn. If I ever decide to try something like a life again. A real one. With people in it. You should know this. He watched me, eyes intent but patient. "I won't go back to being the girl who believed every promise," I said. "I won't forget what you did. I won't pretend the hospital never happened. If you're expecting some clean slate, I can't give you that." "I'm not," he said softly. "I don't want to wipe it away. I just want to be someone who stands on the side of the ledger that doesn't hurt you anymore." I looked at him for a long time. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, grease-stained card. My business card. Bees Braces. Port Sterling Middle. Riverbend Market. Call for catering. I held it out. He accepted it carefully, as if it were made of glass. "This is not a love confession," I warned him. It's a trial period. His smile spread, slow and genuine. Understood. Probationary lapdog. I can work with that. Good, I said. Because I have a very demanding client next month. The parish group's annual employee banquet. His eyebrows shot up. You're catering your own family's company event? Not my family's, I corrected. My company's. They just happen to share the last name. He chuckled. And what's on the menu? Whatever I feel like feeding them, I said. They've eaten my life once already. They can eat my cooking now. Caleb tucked the card into his wallet like it was something valuable. Then he pushed off the pole. Come on, he said. I'll walk you home. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then I nodded. As we walked through the quiet streets, the market noise fading behind us and the sea breeze lifting the edges of my jacket, I realized something. The story really had ended. The villainess had lost everything. The heroine's shine had cracked and fallen to pieces. The faithful supporting characters had stumbled, tripped over their own blind devotion, and crashed into the truth. The script was in shreds. And yet, here I was. Alive. Breathing. Walking home beside a man who had once helped bury me and was now helping carry my groceries. The story had ended. What came next was mine. Not as Beatrice Parrish, the arrogant heiress of Port Sterling. Not as the villainess who died at the heroine's wedding. Not as the tragic madwoman locked away in an institution. Just as B. The woman who sold braised meats on the street, who could topple empires with a USB drive and still argue about the price of pork bones. The woman who, against all odds, had crawled out of the margins and picked up the pen. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came after the end. Because this time, I was the one writing it.